I'll speak louder.
Cheers. Yeah, that's the one. Cool.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for coming down. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a rundown about copywriting. I'm not sure how much of you already know about. Sorry, I'm not sure how much you already know about it, but after the end of this, so I'm going to talk about what is copywriting, the different types of copywriting. Well, the most common ones that I find myself doing or my colleagues do. How to differentiate your brand voice, which if you're a startup, small business, an entrepreneur, this is super important. And then the mistakes you could be making without even realizing it. And I realize killing your credibility is a bit harsh, but that's part of copywriting. You've got to get attention somehow. So I'll start by telling you what copywriting is not. It's not this. So I've had quite a few people ask me, do I work in legal? And I have to say no idea. I never even think about that, but that's because I'm too far into what I actually do to think about legal. But copywriting is essentially this. It's all about rearranging your words to make things sell better. Essentially, when I write, it's the act of writing that gets your audience to perform an action, whatever that could be. So, some of my notes. And that's how I understand copywriting. So, I'm essentially self-taught. I didn't go to uni to study it. I studied photography and film, so you can see how well that worked. But after that, I did a PR degree, and then I worked in a few different roles around Perth in different writing capacities. And I think that's what helped me get skilled at writing. But I didn't go to uni to study, all the psychological triggers and all that kind of thing that make people sell. I learned it myself through a lot of trial and error, and now here I am today. But I do know that that is how you get people to listen to you and what you're saying. Sorry, I'm way ahead of myself. As you can see, I'm not a skilled presenter. So, copywriting. When we talk about copywriting, there are generally two types you'll hear about. There's content and there's copy. So the content writing, that's just the standard stuff you see on a website, on a blog, in your emails. It's just all quite passive, and it's there, it's informational. It just tells people something and they take that away, and that's it. Whereas copywriting, it gets someone to do something. It might be purchase from you, it might be get in contact to talk about your business, it might be sign up for an email link, it might be sign up to your newsletter. So the copywriting is getting that conversion happening. So it's about converting someone from being a passive audience member into actively engaging with your business. So, sounds simple, but how you do it is really the crux of it all. So before I get into brand voice, which I think is super important in copywriting, I'm going to run you through the different types of copywriting that you might be thinking about getting or that you might want to have for your business. So, content writing. This is basically all that passive stuff, but it's super important. So it's all your blogs, it's the content that sits on your service pages, it's the about story on your website, it's all of that. It's basically an information transaction. People read this, they learn something, they understand a bit more about your business, about what you do. You've got the SEO copywriting. So this is tied in with the content writing, but I understand we might have an SEO person here, so correct me if I'm wrong. But SEO writing is content that's geared towards ranking on Google or other search engines. So it's all about inserting those special keywords in the right places, at the right density, so people, go to Google, they search copywriter Perth, and your business will come up. Now, I'm not an SEO guy, but I do know that SEO is changing as we speak, regularly actually. So it used to be that for SEO copywriting, you would just stuff your keywords in as much as you could, but you can always tell that kind of writing. It's clunky, it's awkward, and it's just not fun to read. So these days, for SEO copywriting, it's more about creating rich content that sounds good, that is valuable to your customers or to your audience. And that somehow Google ranks as much more effective, and it gets higher on the list. So social media copywriting, that is a different skill entirely, because every social media platform, it's got its own language, right? So social media copywriters, they have to understand the language of that specific platform, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or whatever other platform the kids are using these days, and then write within that language. And it's really hard, actually. It's not my cup of tea, but if you can find a skilled social media copywriter, then you're laughing. Now, B2B versus B2C. You might have heard these terms. If you haven't, B2B, business to business, B2C, business to consumer. And basically, these are the two modes in which you would do copywriting. So you're either writing for a business audience, or you're writing for a consumer audience. And that really depends on what your business, what your startup, what your brand is doing. But the way you do that is quite different. So business, they already know that they need your services. So in business copywriting, your aim is to get them to see why you're the best team for the job. And that's all about demonstrating the features of what your startup, what your brand does. It could be showing that it shouldn't be about price, but it could be showing that you are the best priced team for that. Whereas B2C, you're speaking to people rather than business. So in this case, you've got to get the person rather than the organisation on board. So your role is to convince them to do something. That sounds salesy, but that's it distilled, you know? So instead of speaking to the features of your business, you would instead talk to the end benefits of what you do. So instead of saying, we sell X, you would say, you'll feel better when you buy X from us. You know? And that's horribly clunky there, but that's it in a nutshell. It's all about getting people to realise how their life's going to be once they've used your services or your product. Then there's technical copywriting. And again, this is quite a skill set to have. So it's all about taking detailed technical information and turning that into content that your audience can understand. So in this, it's a lot more, it uses a lot more technical terms than your regular copywriting. I don't want to say jargon because that kind of sounds like it's all made up, but a technical copywriter, they're able to weave all these technical terms into your content really easily and naturally and explain your idea succinctly. So again, this is, if you can find a skilled technical copywriter, it's quite a skill to have. And then there's tender and bid writing, which some of you might already have been involved in. So that is trying to write the content that helps your business win the job. Now, as well, this is quite a specialized skill to have. So you've got to understand the format of the tender or the bid in which you're writing, and then use the words that your audience is going to understand to prove why you're the team to do the work for them. So it's almost like, a resume or a cover letter for your business, but a lot more involved and a lot more harder to write. So again, if you find a good tender writer, you're laughing. Now, direct response copywriting. This is probably the thing you all associate with copywriting when you hear about it. It's about creating content that speaks directly to your audience, that gets them to perform the action you want. So whether, like I said, whether it's getting in contact with you, whether it's buying that thing from you, whether it's signing up to your email list, whether it's booking a consultation, this is what direct response copywriting is all about. It's about getting that conversion. But a lot of the time, when you hear people talk about this, or when you see it written down, it can come across as quite aggressive, or salesy, or just really buy. And that's what you don't want to do. So it's a fine line to walk about getting it to say the right thing in the most compelling way, instead of going overboard and making people feel icky and like they want to take a step back and like you're shouting at them. But direct response copywriting is the one that's going to get people thinking about the end result of working with your business or using your product. So again, instead of speaking to the features, they will see the benefits. So you've got some piece of tech, instead of saying it does this, they will think about how it's easier to turn their lights on with an automatic button or something. Terrible example again, but you get the idea. It's all about the end result and making them feel that. All right, so pulling all these all together, the key thing to get it right is your brand voice. So that is the way your business speaks. It's the little tonal markers that you use that change the language that you use. So instead of saying we are company X, you say we're company X. So contractions, that sort of thing. It's those little differences that take your brand from just being another brand to having a personality. That's it. Your brand voice is your distinct written personality, yeah? So it's what people see when they go to your website. It's what they see on your emails. It's what they even see on your business cards. It's all that kind of thing. It's all the words that you write that form your business's personality. And that is what people remember. It's through all your written communication, so it's important to get it right at the outset of your startup, of your small business. It can be done later. It just makes it a lot easier for consistency if you get it done at the start. So to define your brand voice, there are a few things you need to do. And it's not about trying to make yourself too different to your competition. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you go way out of the park with how you sound, with the kind of language you use in your industry, then it's probably going to make people take a step back and turn them away. A good way to describe it is, in the tech space, you've got Apple and Samsung, right? They're probably the gold standard on how to communicate your tech idea. But if you were to come along and create this great new business, but you had a brand like, BCF, that camping fishing shop that just shouts, it's really ochre, it's really Aussie, it's really blokey, and you try to position your tech brand in that voice, then it's probably not going to fly. So while you do want to differentiate yourself, you don't want to do it that much. So when thinking about your brand voice, you've got to think about your brand. What does that look like? What does that sound like? You've got to think about your industry. What's appropriate for your industry? And again, it's not about, when I say appropriate, you've just got to create a voice that makes a space for your brand. And then what do your audience want to know? How do they respond? What do they respond to? And that is probably the key thing. So your business, again, I'll use the tech idea. If you're targeting, say, 40 to 50-year-old engineers, you wouldn't have the same brand voice as a lifestyle brand targeting 20 to 30-year-olds. It just wouldn't work. So how your audience talk, how they think, how they speak, that's the way that your brand voice should sound, essentially. And when I do a brand voice, I start by doing something I call a brand voice discovery with my clients. So it's a series of questions where we sit down or they take it away. I've got a little page and a half of questions that gets them thinking about their business, about what they do, who they are, their values, their customer, and then we kind of pull that all together. So I ask them to describe their business's style. So this could be, is it more of a corporate brand? Is it laid back? If it's a lifestyle brand, is it relaxed? Is it all about having a good time? Is it sharp? Is it not aggressive, but is it confident? And then what do they not want to sound like? What are they not trying to be? So again, if you're a lifestyle brand, you probably wouldn't try and be too aggressive or too corporate. Or if you're in the real estate industry, you probably wouldn't be using, or you wouldn't want to sound like the same way as, you know, a tech startup. The language from those different industries just doesn't fit, if that makes sense. And then this is one of my favorite questions. If your business was a person, how would you describe their personality? Because that in itself kind of hits it on the head. What is your business's personality? And that can turn into how you speak. So is your personality, is it outgoing? Is it friendly? Is it confident? Is it humble? Is it, does it use slang? Does it not use slang? All that kind of thing. And again, I try and have my clients tell me what they think their brand voice should sound like. So we talk about the type of language that they use, and again, importantly, the language they don't use. So I find these questions about what you don't want to do or what you want to stay away from really important, because it helps you kind of put that divide down, and you can really see where you don't want to take your business. So if we're creating a brand voice and we're making it sound, you know, friendly, earthy, organic, things like that. So say you're in the nutrition space, then you want to make sure you distance itself from those other businesses in your space that are maybe too holistic sounding, a bit too you know, airy-fairy, that kind of thing. And you know, they aren't great words, but just having that idea, and you know, no matter what words you use, having that idea of what you want to distance yourself from, that really helps you kind of head towards where you want to sound. And then another good way to think about your brand personality is, what are some brands that have inspired yours? So this doesn't even have to be in your space. So I get a lot of clients saying Apple have inspired them, and you know, Apple's probably inspired everyone, but it's a really good brand to, you know, lay the groundwork of how you want to sound. Because they speak simply, they speak clearly, they make it easy, and that's a great start. And what brands do you want to distance yourself from? So, you know, say you're a real estate brand and you want to stand out from the rest of the people in your local area, then we can have a look at their, you know, their branding, their communications, and try and work out a way to sound different from that. Because, like I said, if you're in your sector, a lot of the time it will all sound similar. And so while you're not trying to over-differentiate yourself, there is a good opportunity there to sound that little bit different that people see, they remember. And that's it. Your brand voice doesn't necessarily need to stand out, but it does need to be yours. So while you aren't going to go out there and create any crazy new words or you know, make it pop like a Fanta ad or something, if you use the right words and if you speak in the right way for your audience, then they're going to remember that. And then they'll remember you more than they'll remember the words. And then you've hooked them. Because when you think about, when you speak with someone, like face to face, you don't really remember what they sound like unless they sound different. And for the most part, that's a bad thing. So if you're speaking with someone and they speak too loudly, or they speak too aggressively, or they speak too softly, or they've just got a weird voice in general, you notice that and you remember that, and that's what you remember about them. But when they speak in a way that you understand, if they speak like you remember what they say more than how they sound. And that's about creating that space in your industry. So it's all about speaking simply, making it easy for your audience to understand you, and then making your business easy for them to relate to. And that's where the brand voice comes into it. If you use the language they understand in a way they understand, then they're going to associate your brand, your business, your startup with thinking and acting like them. But the most important element is clarity. You've got to make it clear. Make it as easy as possible for people to understand what you do, how you can help them, and what they'll get out of that. And this is how I like to work. if your written voice is clear, concise, and conversational, it's much more impactful, much more valuable than trying to create a voice that's memorable. Because if you try to make a memorable voice, people can tell, and it just feels forced. It's like that, what is it, that Compare the Market ad with the meerkats, and they've got that horrible word, simpleness. You know, I can see they're trying to stand out, and they have done a job of that, but it just feels forced, doesn't it? You know, it's not a word that people use, and it just comes across like it was created in a marketing meeting, which it probably was. But instead, if they had just spoken clearly, concisely, and conversationally, like those other market aggregators, then people like me, anyway, probably would have warmed a lot more to that brand. So that's it. Copywriting makes things simple, and your brand voice makes things make sense. So it's all about using those two in conjunction. You've got to write the words in a clear way, but also use the language that makes it make sense. So I want you to think about, well, not right now, but if you've got a business, if you've got a startup, if you've got an idea, what does your brand sound like, or what do you want it to sound like? And then how do you translate that into language, into words on your website, in your communications, anywhere. So, importantly, I'm just going to run through some mistakes that you might be making, and then how we can correct them. So, I've probably mentioned a few of these before as well, but here we go. Not putting the time into creating a brand voice. So when you start your brand, when you start your business, you go through the process, you get the color scheme, you get the logo, you get the collateral, all that kind of stuff, which is important. But the brand voice is what helps to frame your communications going forward. So if you don't have that, things can be a little ad hoc or confused. So your brand voice lays the groundwork for how you communicate with your customers, with your clients going forward. But it's also important not to use the wrong language. So, like I said, if you're speaking with an audience who's engineers, you wouldn't use the same language or voice that you would if you're selling coffee to cyclists. Even though there's probably quite a bit of overlap there, but maybe you would. Anyway, that's a bad example. It's got to be right. So lifestyle brand versus, say, real estate brand, they are two different ways of speaking. And if you try and take language from some of them and put it into another, then it'll feel forced, it'll feel like you just shoehorned it in there, and people are going to remember that something wasn't right about your content rather than what you're actually trying to say. And a big no-no is making the content all about you. So on your website, on your brochures, you might be tempted to say, we've achieved, this many dollars in sales or something, or we help these businesses. And that's important information to have, but what your customers, what your audience are really wanting to know is how you help them. And I'm sure you all know that already, but in your writing, in your brand voice, in your communications, you need to make sure that, again, you are talking to what they get out of a relationship with you. So go the few steps further, say, you will feel this way if you use our product this way. Here's what we've done here, here's how to get in contact with us. So instead of focusing all about what we do, say, you will get this out of a relationship with us. And then in your writing, you can say that. You can always say you, and then if you use the word you in your writing, people will read that, and then it'll stick in their head that you are talking to them. It's really subtle, but it actually really works. And also, you shouldn't make your content too formal. And this is a difficult one, because if you're just starting your startup or your business, you'll be sending out a lot of capability statements and all those kind of things. But you don't have to make it super stuffy, structured, government-y like, because people don't want to read that. And especially at the moment, I've noticed the last 10 or 20 years there's been a big shift in how these corporate type businesses are speaking. I call it modern corporate. So they're taking what was once quite a dry way of speaking, and they've turned that into something that's conversational. You know, it's not casual, but it does sound a lot more like a real person speaking. So brands like Western Power, HBF, Bank West, they're all doing a great job of this. You know, they speak in a way that it just makes sense, doesn't it? It's friendly, it's personable, but it also tells you the information that you need to know to be able to work with them, or to make the choice that this is the business for me. I understand what they do. I know how to get in contact with them. And dare I say, sometimes it is actually really fun. Like Bankwest are doing a great job of their personal brand voice at the moment. And again, you don't want to over differentiate yourself. Like I said, you can make up words, but only if it's appropriate for your business. Don't use symbols. That's terrible. But people are going to remember if you have all these crazy words that you've made up, or if you speak in a way that sounds like it's a soda company or something. So just trying to create the space in your sector for your business, that's a lot more memorable and a lot more engaging than it is trying to push the boundaries too much. And I know that probably is counterintuitive, but it really works. But on that note, you shouldn't use too much fluff or jargon either. So all these filler words like results driven. Now everyone is results driven. It's not something you need to say, and it doesn't really mean anything anymore. Or using words like utilize, where you could use the word use. You know, you can simplify what you say and cut out words that are trying to sound professional or sound corporate, and still make just as much sense. And because it's simpler, clearer, and it's a word that everyone understands straight away, they're going to get it quicker, and they're going to feel like you're a business that gets them. And this is where, number 7, inconsistent brand voice. This is where having that brand voice at the start comes into it. You see this a lot on websites that have existed for a while. At one point, they might have had something consistent there, but then people have come along. Their marketing officer has changed. They've taken bits, they've moved it to somewhere else. They've changed their tactics, and there are like different paragraphs written in different ways on the same web page. Even in brochures, you might have one page that's all about the features, the benefits of your business, but then your story about your business is written in a different way. And you can tell. It's not always obvious, but there are just those subtle differences in the language, like the contractions, or like using different jargon. One section uses jargon, one uses clear words, and that inconsistency can be jarring when you read it. So if that happens, if you're down the line and that happens, you can have someone go through it, like clear it all up, make it all read in the same way. But to avoid that, having that distinct brand voice, having a clear, consistent message from the start, that helps you, speak in the right way for the future. And you've got that framework, and you can fall back on that framework, those guidelines, and then anytime someone new comes into your business, they can pick it up and run with it. And I've seen this a lot. Just don't copy your competition, especially in blogs. I find you'll find a lot of people have, if not straight up ripped off other people's blogs, they might have taken that and then moved some of the paragraphs around, changed some of the headings, put their name in there a few times. It could be because it's a syndicated thing and people buy the content, but I think it's just through laziness. And if you do this kind of thing, people will notice. And for some, it might not be a deal breaker, but for others, it just kind of shows that lack of originality and the fact that you don't have an idea of what you're trying to say or what you're trying to communicate. And also, don't copy people's slogans. Those taglines, those things like simpleness, don't try and come up with your own. It's difficult, but yeah. You might see businesses say, in one country, think that someone in another country won't realise, but they do. It's like Frisk, the bar up in Northbridge? They had someone over in, I think, was it Bali or Singapore, just rip off their entire brand, their entire business, their entire theme. So it might not be as obvious as that, but people will know. Yeah, so if you're making any of these mistakes, there is a way to fix it, it just might take time. So the best way to avoid it is to have that consistent brand voice from the start. So the next step is to take it, tie it all together, and create a brand voice that suits your business. And if you're working with a copywriter, we can help you do that. So we will sit with you, run through that brand voice discovery. I mean, I will. I'm sure other people do as well. They will run through that brand voice discovery, understand the words that your business does use, what you don't use, what you want to stay away from, your personality, what your brand would be like if it was a person, and then use that to create a brand voice guideline. So that's just a really simple document. It runs through the key tonal markers of your business. So it'll talk about, we're confident, and then explain what that means in your communications. We're humble or something, and how that rolls out when it's written. We are professional, but not stuffy. And all those ways of speaking, all those personality traits, they will come together in this one document. And then we'll also have a little bit of a list of do's and don'ts as well. So do speak to your customer in this second person, you. So speak to them as you rather than the customer, the client. Use active voice rather than passive, which is a whole different thing that I'm still not 100% sure about. But that brand voice guideline will be a really handy document that your business or your startup can then have. Everyone in your business can read it. When you have new people come on board, they can read it, and then they know the basics of how to speak in your brand voice or how to write in your brand voice. And then going forward, you've got this framework. So I'm here to answer some questions about copywriting. Let's talk. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
We have questions.
I was going to ask, if you're, so say you're a startup or a small business, if you have, let's say pretty minimal copywriting or brand voice,
Yep.
would the brand voice be the first priority before you start looking at all the other documents and other copyright, all the other sections covered at the start?
Yeah, so I would, if you have the chance to start from the beginning, I would say start with the brand voice. So it's like your brand guideline. So your colours, your logos, and all that. If you've got the brand voice written and created alongside that, you can use those two, and then in conjunction have a consistent tone, a consistent voice going forward, and then you can have all your key messages there as well, ready to go, so you don't have to make those up in the future.
I have a question about direct response.
Yes.
How do you recommend making offers? How consistently? I've got my business is coaching. How often would you recommend making an offer versus providing value and content? So it's getting people to take action, but not jamming the stuff down people's throat every time you talk.
That's a really good question, and it really depends on what offer you're trying to make. So if it's just on a website and they go to your website, you should have the offer there 2, 3, even 4 times. It depends. But it really depends on what you are trying to get them to achieve. So, and again, this kind of sounds more like it's getting into the marketing space rather than the brand voice. But if you're communicating with them and you're sending them an email, you're making a social media post or something, it is always good to end with a call to action for them. So it might not necessarily be to buy this course or sign up for my program now. It could just be get in touch to speak about what I do. It can be quite simple and not passive, but not as aggressive. But it is always good to give them a call to action in most of your communications. But again, it comes down to how it's written. So if you write it in more of a conversational, casual way, it feels a lot less like selling than if you say 3 days to go, this amazing course, get in quick, you know? So yeah, unfortunately I can't 100% answer that, but it is all about how you say it. So yeah, we can talk about that afterwards if you like.
Will you recommend some sort of call to action after, like whether it's go to my email list, get this free download, you know, check out this video, or this is the coaching page? Do you recommend some sort of like call
Yeah.
to action at the end, like regardless of how small it is?
Mostly, if it's a text or something, maybe not, unless the whole text is about calling you. But for the most part, yeah, I'd recommend just something that's clear and not necessarily aggressive. So, you know, I've got a great video that, you know, that talks about this, check it out here, or something like that. Yeah.
I was just going to add just a suggestion because I've been going through that myself. What I find is, you know, I'm not trying to see it straight away, but building a bit of rapport and first finding out what the needs are, because you can't assume that all the documents, or if they need them, just understand, you know, what they need. So I think it's best to have a bit of an interaction and find out
Yeah.
a bit about them before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where that content writing comes into it. So if you can give them information that demonstrates value, that's really great at you know, establishing your credibility. But if it's, you know, a face-to-face conversation, then that's not my area. I'm about the writing, but that's absolutely right. You shouldn't come out of the gates just blazing away with a sale. Like, at least try and give them something that they can relate to, that they can see as like a brand that they want to interact with first. Yeah, start by building the relationship first, then move on to the sale.
Great presentation, by the way. Learned a lot. And a good example of like great brand voice is like Ammo's stuff. Is like
Yes.
your stuff's really amazing. So like, they're really on point, and I think their content's really great. So you guys do awesome job on that. That's not my question. That's just like an observation. So if you want to see good content and brand voice, like check out this stuff. But my question was like, do you have like a favourite like AI tool to help you? And I don't mean to like to write the stuff for you. Like I kind of like have learned so much using like Grammarly as an aid in the last like 18 months to like just chop out a lot of like the excess use of words and stuff like that and make my words more efficient. So I was just wondering if you had like a tool that you also use, not to like write for you, but to help you be like really on point.
No.
Probably don't need it.
Well, that's the thing. I'm very critical of what I write, so I do go through and like I give it what I call a dust off at the end and make sure I cut out any unnecessary words. I do use Grammarly, but I find mine turns itself off occasionally. So yeah, I have been caught out there. But for anyone who is starting to write or wants to start writing, 100% get Grammarly. It is amazing. Like it's really good, isn't it?
It's pretty good. Like I think
Yeah.
like I've certainly learned to be more efficient the way I write,
Yeah.
and so then you rely on the tool less because you just sort of learn things.
Yeah, yeah. The paid version is obviously much better than the free version because it gives you those examples of words you can use instead, like where to cut out words. Yeah.
It's like having your English teacher, like
It is,
like,
it
see
is,
your word,
yeah.
like,
Yeah, and it's also great just for catching some of those spelling mistakes, but somehow I can't seem to set mine from US to English, so yeah, it's not 100% useful, but on the whole, can recommend. Yeah.
I use the free one. I have to turn it off a few times because it just slows the typing down.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll write
Yeah.
10 words and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
There it is. I
Yeah,
turn it off
big
Grammarly.
documents you can like read it online.
Yeah. I thought I had a virus at one point. I was like, oh no, turn Grammarly off. Yeah.
It just reminded me about active and passive voice, and I get Grammarly to help me with
Yeah.
turning my passive voice into an active voice. Still don't understand it, but any like get insight into why my active voice is better, or
It's just a lot. It's just a lot more active.
Yeah.
No, like it makes the sentences kind of flow and sound better. So, okay, a quick example, the dog was riding the skateboard. I think that's active, but if you say the skateboard was ridden by the dog, that's passive. It's just a bit boring and a bit flat. So active pushes the sentences forward and kind of keeps you reading, if that makes sense. Whereas passive slows things down. And a passive voice is very much that corporate tone. You know, that kind of stuffy writing, that report sound that isn't necessarily what you want to read on someone's website. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Oh, and if anyone wants a really great book about those basics like passive and active writing, there's a book by the copywriter Tate Ishia. The book is called Copy Wrong to Copywriter. Simple title. It's like really short as well. Really great, really clear to understand. It's really great groundwork on how to just get those basics right to begin with. And he's a great writer, so it's really fun. And I think that's where I got the skateboarding dog example from. Yeah.
Awesome.
What is do you have any industry or certain type of business that you feel that you write best?
That's an interesting one as well, because when I first started copywriting, I did a lot of reading about it because I didn't know much about it, and everything I read said you should find a niche and stick in that. But I've actually found it a lot more rewarding and enjoyable for myself to kind of work across a variety of different industries. Somehow most of my main clients seem to be in the finance space, or digital agencies, of course. But I don't have one specific industry that I write for. I know where I don't write, so I prefer not to write for social media, for brands. And I know this could be selling myself short, but I try to stay away from writing for real estate companies. But on the whole, most industries I'm happy to get into and find out more about. And you know, it keeps things interesting. Like I wrote a website for this company. They did, what was it? They made the joints in undersea cables. You know, something I would never know about, but you know, I got to learn all about how undersea cables are laid, and you know the pressures involved, and like the different materials, and just stuff like that. So technically boring stuff, but really interesting when you get into it. Yeah, but I know some copywriters have had fantastic success writing in their one niche, but I prefer to work across a few.
What have you got against real estate agencies? Real estate brands?
It's not against the agencies. It's just that type of writing, you know, writing about houses and property listings and things like that. I've done some of it. I just didn't enjoy it. You know, it just wasn't for me. It's definitely a skill, and I know a lot of copywriters do start out there because you've got to really, like I say, sell the sizzle, not the sausage. So it's kind of that amplified direct response copywriting. So make people feel what they're going to feel living in that house. Like talk about how it's right next to the sea and what this means for your lifestyle. Yeah, it just didn't interest me. That was all. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Why are you in real estate? Something?
No, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
If you had a startup, right, and had a two-sided market, so like both business to business and business to consumer, how would you go about structuring that sort of brand voice?
Good one. Well, with that, the brand voice, again, you could just take a leaf out of one of the big players. So Apple, Samsung, even like Bankwest or something. Just keep your writing and your brand voice simple. Make it clear. If you do ever have to use a technical concept, you can explain that for the consumers. But you can have the same. You can use one brand voice for those two different types of writing. It's just about making it clear for everyone to understand, because then everyone gets it, don't they? yeah, just make it clear, concise, simple. But then I would say if you're having a website for your startup, have different sections for those different audiences. So you can have one section talking to the features or the benefits that a business might want, and then you can have a section talking to what the consumer's going to get out of it. And even then, the people in the business, they're just consumers themselves, aren't they? So then you hit two birds with one stone. Yeah, so it's just about making that differentiation, having your overall brand voice, just be really clear. And if you want, we can chat about that more after. At the back.
Probably a really small one, and I've had a lot of conflicting advice. When you're putting stats or numbers, would you recommend spelling out numbers from 1 to 10, or writing the actual number? Like I know with marketing, I've read that writing the actual number is much and works better for website copy.
Again, that depends. I've always understood that rule of like write the word up to 10. But if you're writing just a really simple sentence on your website, then and people are going to be just skimming over it. In that case, it might be better to write a number. So then people can see straight away 9% or 98%, something like that. It just makes the information easier to take in. So while I don't have a definite answer, it's just more about what's appropriate for your audience. I mean, I would always write what you originally said, but it just depends on where it's going to go. Does that help? Yeah. Well, if you want to send me an email afterwards, we can have a chat about that later as well. Yeah.
Just a quick one about, I suppose, if you were to consult a business for yourself, how do you make the difference between bad copywriting, good copywriting, tangible? Are you able to measure the difference somehow? How do you see an outcome from good tone voice or good brand voice?
That's a very good question too. No, that's not something I normally do. I work with my clients and I say, this doesn't sound right for these reasons. People aren't going to understand what this means. This is hard to understand. And then I'll take that, I'll create a revised version and then show them what it could sound like. And again, it's all about making it clear and easy to understand. So if I can show someone what it could sound like and how it could benefit their business, that's what I focus on. I know some people might be able to, work out the percentage increase in sales or something from different styles of writing. I can't do that. I just know that if you write something better and it sounds good, it's going to get a lot more traction.
I guess you could A/B test a website, one with bad, or one with your original copy and one with the redesigned copy, and see which one gets more conversions, more sign-ups, things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, yeah.
There's tools like Optimizely or
Just put Google Analytics on your site as a starting point, and you should be able to see results, like at least high level. But yeah, there's other tools out there you can use Google Optimize and things like that as well. But yeah, all you probably need to start with is Google Analytics to see the impact, at least to start.
awesome. Go for it, one more.
Talking about different types of copywriting in social media and blog posts, and then actually the sales pages of your website is what actually delivering on that. So I do all of that in a business, and so like where does a copywriter, do you get a second copywriter for, because mine's very technical, it's speech pathology, and so for parents, so that I write that because I'm speech pathologist, very technical, and if I want to get someone to write the blog instead of me, it would probably be a speech pathologist. But when do you get the copywriting in? Is it more for the web page, like blog posts, and
Again, that depends.
Yeah.
So for example, if it was me, so I'll back up a little. Before I was a copywriter, I worked at Western Power, So there, my role was to take the detailed electrical information from the engineers and translate that into stuff that anyone in the community, from a CEO of a company down to your mums and dads up in Gingin, they can understand. So some copywriters, not to advertise, but like myself, can actually work with you on that technical information and turn that into a blog for you. So as long as you give them all the right information that they need to say, so any key statistics, any key messages, any key arguments, they can work with you on that and turn that into content that makes sense without losing the accuracy. Again, you should always read over it after I've done it and make sure it does tick all the boxes. But yes, some copywriters, I'm sure a lot of copywriters, when they start the job, they research what they're writing about. So, and they get to learn the industry, they get to learn the business, and so nothing's lost there. And I think that is what probably differentiates a middle ground copywriter to a good one. So if they take the time to learn about what it is that you do, why you do it, how it works, that's going to save you heaps of time. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that was awesome, James. Thank you very much. I hope you all got some stuff out of that, and please. All right. So we have to turn this place back into a co-working space. But please hang around. Don't get scared by all the flying furniture. Please get to know each other and interact and all that stuff. And in 2 weeks' time, we are hosting a pitch competition. So who here is starting a startup, starting a business, wants to get the word out? No one? Awesome. Okay, come on. So what we do is we'll have probably 6 or 8 startups. They'll do their 3-minute pitch. Yes, 3 minutes. So you've got to make sure it's really succinct. It's getting the message across. It's telling the audience what your business is all about. And that we may have some people that might give you some comments and things and some advice after the pitch. So yeah, come along, please. If you want to get involved in the pitch, just send us an email to contact@morningstartup.com with a short description of what your startup is all about, and we'll get you in on that. But please come along and just watch the pitches and support them. So that's in 2 weeks' time, and I think next week we've got Found a Sundowner at Nowhere Man Brewery, so come along for a bevy and a chat. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Cheers.